All right, well, we'll go ahead. It's time to get started here this evening. Good to see everybody. Glad you could make it out. Hope we have a good, profitable study here tonight. We're in the book of Exodus, as we have been this quarter, and we're following the children of Israel through all the different things that the Lord has led them through. They've left Egypt, and they're in the wilderness, and there are some different points in the wilderness. They've moved a couple times, but it's not been very long since they've left. We saw a 2-month timeline, I believe, last class, and I think we may see one mentioned about 3 months today in today's lesson. So it's not been very long since they left, and we have mentioned this has got to be a stressful situation for them. This many people in the wilderness in a barren area, and that being what they came from, they were slaves, and they've left Egypt, and they don't it doesn't seem like they have a lot of anything set up as far as for the future or anything. So they've gotten into some of these situations here where they've run out of water a couple times now, and they got hungry there in our last lesson, and it seems like up until now they haven't had the best attitude towards how to address this when this happens. They seem that they're angry. They come to Moses. They're mad. They say we've been better off if we never left Egypt, even though that sounds absurd to say. But we just see their kind of wishy-washiness in their attitude toward how they respond to the adversity that they do face. They are facing some adversity. Remember, we saw when they crossed the Red Sea, their song that they sung there. They had all faith in God. They were confident in Him. He was going to take care of them. And then they're thirsty again, or they're hungry. Now we had the story of how He fed them last lesson we covered, and it's a very interesting story, one that you kind of never forget. But the Lord answered their prayer. He has answered their prayer each time that they've been in need. And, He gave them the quail there on that occasion. Then He provided the situation for how the manna was going to work. And the manna was going to be something for them to eat every day. And He gave them rules about how much to get and when to get it. And we even have the Sabbath day brought up here as to how the seventh day was going to be different. We're not going to go out and gather and do the things we do on the Sabbath day as we do on the other days of the week. And we had the criteria that it would, any other day you kept it over, it would spoil, but on the Sabbath day you gathered double and it didn't spoil, and things like that. So that was kind of where we're at in the story. We're halfway through chapter 17 tonight, and at the beginning of 17 was another one of those situations where they were without water, and Moses struck the rock there, and as the Lord had commanded him, and water came from it. So that's where we end. That's where we ended last time, and we're going to pick up tonight. Does anybody have anything to say, kind of as an intro or review or anything before we begin?
It might be worth mentioning, just because of the story we're about to open up with, that, again, this is part of the review, but He did not take them straight to the land of Canaan. And why was that? They weren't ready for what?
Battle.
For war, right? They weren't ready for battle. So that's going to play a little bit of a part in what we're about to read. It's not maybe the main point we're about to read, but I think it's interesting to note that, because we're about to see they're going to have to face something.
Well, the other thing is, if you took them straight to Canaan, you couldn't do what God told Moses to tell Pharaoh. They were supposed to read and worship God. And God's intention is not to worship back where He promised to Abraham. It's around close to where Moses actually seen God there in the burning bush.
Yeah, He did tell him, you're going to come back to this mountain and worship me after all that was over. Good. Okay, well, chapter 17, we'll begin in verse 8 there. Now Amalek came and fought with Israel in Rephidim. So, like he just said, have we been in a fight yet? No. Have we probably ever been in a battle or in a war or in a fight? I don't guess so. Their background is slaves. Are they equipped for a fight? No, they're not. They're slaves that think that every little bit that they might be fixing to starve to death in the desert or die of thirst. They're not equipped for this. So this seems like a not very good situation.
And you mind if I?
No, go ahead.
I might also mention that this is not a fight that God has told them to take up, right? So when they get to Canaan, there will be a fight He tells them to take up. This is not one of those. He's not telling them to seek out the Amalekites to wage war with them. The Amalekites have initiated this, so that's worth mentioning here.
Yes. So Moses says to who? Joshua. We have a new character introduced here. We will definitely see more of him in the future, but it appears that he is the go-to guy when this situation happens. He is the one that is told to choose up us some men and go out, fight with Amalek. Tomorrow I will stand on the top of the hill with a rod of God in my hand. So Joshua is the man that is told to try to get some men together to go up and fight. And I don't know what this would include, finding people to do it. I don't know what equipment they would have. They fight with them, so they have some sort of battle. I don't know what they're able to use for weapons, but that's his job, task, to get some together. So Joshua did as Moses said to him and fought with Amalek. And Moses and Aaron and Hur went up the top of the hill. So he had mentioned before, you go get some men ready. I'm going to go up on top of the hill. And it says, and so it was when Moses held up his hand that Israel prevailed. And when he let down his hand, Amalek prevailed. So we've got the situation here where they are not in any way equipped or ready for a fight. We've established that. And Moses, and God has set it up this way, that Moses goes up where he is in sight of all the people, overlooking the lower area where the battle was taking place. And he has his hand or his hands raised up there. He has his staff in his hand. And he is able to be seen by all the Israelites who were fighting. They can look up and they can see Moses there on the hill. And Moses is standing there with his hands up in the air. As long as he has them up, everything's good. They prevail, it says. But whenever he doesn't have them up, Amalek starts to prevail. I don't know how long this went on, but if you can imagine how anybody, I don't care who you are, would have had a hard time doing this. If you ever seen anybody that's working out or something, there's a point where you may be going strong for a little bit, but there's a point where you start wearing out, and then you start declining. And that happens with Moses here. In verse 12 it says, but Moses' hands became heavy. So they took a stone and put it under him, and he sat on it. And Aaron and Hur supported his hands, one on one side and the other on the other side. And his hands were steady until the going down of the sun. So Joshua defeated Amalek and his people with the edge of the sword. So this is just a short little snippet of a situation where a fight came to them, so to speak, as you said, and they really are not equipped or ready or experienced in any way. They had to decide who was even going to go out and fight, had to get a group together. But the Lord used this as an opportunity for them to realize that it wasn't through, well, we got lucky there. Man, we're actually pretty good at this fighting or whatever, that they might have come into their mind here. The Lord used this opportunity for them to see that it was through him, and this sign that he was doing before them that they were able to be successful in this.
Yes.
And it also, from the sun going down, it must have been an all-day battle from the time it started till the sun went down.
Yeah, we know he says tomorrow we'll go to war. If they're going to war as soon as sun up, then it's an all-day thing. Could be. You know, it's interesting on this because does it really talk much about God's hand in this? Not explicitly, does it? I mean, I guess you can infer maybe a lot of things from this if you wanted to. You could infer they look at Moses and it's like, hey, Moses has his hands up. This is a morale boost. Let's go. But we don't do that. Why do we not do that at this point? That's right. And
all of this was to show that power, to take the bottom of control.
yeah, have we gone through a story where God hasn't, aided them in some way? Pretty much no, right? I mean, pretty much every time he's had a hand in it. So even here, it doesn't explicitly say that in what we've just read, but we can see it, and I think that's maybe an interesting thing for us to think about, maybe in our lives. Sometimes we don't want to give God credit for things or say He's had much influence, when maybe He has, and maybe worth thinking about as well.
And he really doesn't give us any details on the fight, on any of the plan, or any of the weapons, or how many people were there, or any of that stuff, because that's not the reason that they were able to be successful there. So let's finish up here. I may finish up this chapter. I may let you take over when we get to 18 and go a bit. So the Lord said to Moses, write this for a memorial in the book and recount it in the hearing of Joshua, that I will utterly blot out the remembrance of Amalek from under heaven. And Moses built an altar and called its name, The Lord is my banner. For he said, because the Lord has sworn, the Lord will have war with Amalek from generation to generation. So it's a memorial. He's to write this down so it can be remembered. And Amalek is mentioned, that there will be war with Amalek because they've came up against them and fought them at this. And he records this, and he names this altar here, The Lord is my banner. So we have this the situation of this little snippet of a battle where the Lord used it to again build their trust and faith in Him. Any other comments or anything before we move on to 18?
Maybe a couple things. So Joshua, we talked about how we're introduced to Joshua here. What role is Joshua taking on here? He's a leader.
Yeah.
And what type of leader? Military leader. Is that going to probably be important later on? We'll probably see that play a part later on, right? Another thing is with Amalek here. God talks about, how's he feel toward Amalek now? Yeah. Did he do that here? No. How do we know that? Yeah, they come up. Actually, they're mentioned a few times later on. And one time they're mentioned. It brings up the fact they're going to be judged because of what they did here. This incident is important later on when judgment's pronounced on them, because they attacked Israel while they were on their way to the land. So this is for that nation, the Amalekites. This is an important moment because it's going to determine things in the future.
He probably annihilates him from the study of Esther. Haman was a descendant of the king Amalek. And we know that Haman's 10 sons were killed. So that's part of God's providence. That, you remember, Haman wanted to wipe out the Jews and annihilate them. Instead, he got annihilated and wiped out.
Yeah.
But David fought against him. Several other kings fought against him.
That's right.
But then Esther, I think, takes care of this.
Yeah. Did we already mention that? Check me on this because I may not be right. But these are descendants of Esau, correct? I think so. So his son's concubine. Esau's son's concubine. Yes. There you go.
I think, did Abraham fight against?
I don't know.
When they took, Genesis 14, verse 7. 14, verse 7. The Amalekites were there
is one of those that hits them a lot.
Okay. I see. Defeated all the country of the Amalekites, verse 7. Maybe it's before that too, but is that what you're talking about in verse 7? Wow.
So Esau was maybe married into that. That's what some scholars say. I don't know.
I wonder, I mean, that may be.
I'm not
I
sure.
wonder if when it says defeated all the country of the Amalekites, I wonder if that's meaning more the location as opposed to the people.
It could be. That's what some. That's
Yeah.
another argument on one side.
And so, like when
Depends on
Moses.
which translation you read. Translation you read.
Gotcha. So maybe when Moses is looking at this, like if it is Esau's descendants and that's it, he's looking at it and saying, like, this is where the Amalekites are from. He defeated them in that area, but and maybe he married his descendant married into the family. Okay. Well, either way, they now have to do somewhat with the Israelites, distantly related. All right, let me go with 18.
Yeah, if you want to.
Okay. So Jethro, the priest of Midian, Moses' father-in-law, heard all that God had done for Moses and for his people, how the Lord had brought Israel out of Egypt. Now Jethro, Moses' father-in-law, had taken Zipporah, Moses' wife, after he had sent her home, along with her 2 sons. The name of one was Gershom, for he said, I have been a sojourner in a foreign land, and the name of the other, Eleazar, for he had said, the God of my father was my help, and delivered me from the sword of Pharaoh. Jethro, Moses' father-in-law, came with his sons and his wife to Moses in the wilderness, where he was encamped at the mountain of God. And when he sent word to Moses, I, your father-in-law Jethro, am coming to you with your wife and her 2 sons with her. Moses went out to meet his father-in-law and bowed down and kissed him, and they asked each other of their welfare and went into the tent. All right, so we have Jethro here. Who's Jethro? How did you know that? It only mentioned it like 5 times. All right, so he's Moses' father-in-law. Why is he coming to where the Israelites are now? Maybe a couple reasons you give for this, but that's right. So that's one reason. And he heard what God did for them, right? I think both those things are probably of interest to him.
Well, this is the area that they're from, right?
Yeah,
This is,
and this is around the area where
yeah,
they're
it's
from.
the area where Moses was first encountered God in the burning bush and all that when he was out near Sinai. So
Yeah, and he went back and told Jethro that too.
Yeah,
So
before he
Jethro
left.
knows about that. So he hears about what God has done through Moses for the Israelites. So he's interested in that. He's also bringing back Moses' family. Now, do we see when Moses' family, when they leave him?
no,
We know they set out with him, right?
they left because of the circumcision deal.
Right. So that would be, I guess we don't know that like for sure technically, but it's after that point that they are not mentioned again. So that's probably a pretty good guess that that's the situation that sent them back, where she decided to go back with her sons, because they're not mentioned again after that deal with the circumcision. So he brings them back. He does not go into the camp of the Israelites. Instead he sends word to Moses. Why do you think this is the case? Not sure. Maybe they didn't read too much into this. That's possible.
Well, it may be because that he's worshipped idols and he's afraid that if he was to go in the camp of the Israelites, God might do something to him.
Yeah, I think that's possible. So I think it could be, maybe it kind of goes along with what you're saying, Steve, but maybe out of respect, maybe out of fear, maybe fear of the people, maybe fear of God. Also, and I don't know if this is the case, but it may just be like there are so many people, it would be hard to find Moses. So it's easier to send word to someone who does know where Moses is at to get him to come to him. That could be it too. But it is interesting he stays outside the camp. If it is for respect, that would be kind of an interesting situation as well. Moses comes to him, and how's that interaction go? Yeah, he's glad to see. They're both glad to see each other, right? We see that. I don't know This comes up very often in the Bible, but we see in verse 7 there, they asked each other of their welfare and went to the tent. That's just kind of interesting. It's like, hey, how are you doing? How are you doing? I don't see maybe a whole lot of that asking about each other's welfare in the Bible, but that's kind of an interesting situation here. They seem to have a good relationship, even after he had to leave, which it seems Jethro was okay with him leaving. But then when Zipporah comes back with the kids, it doesn't seem like that soured their relationship either. It seems like they still have a good relationship even through that. Y'all have anything you want to add before we read the next few verses here?
Just caught my attention, it says priest of Midian, so I didn't know how that played into all that.
Yeah, so he's a believer in God, and we'll see that. Well, maybe at this point he's definitely a believer in God, but we'll see that in a minute. But I think what Steve said earlier is maybe true too, because I think we're going to see his response to what God's done. Right. Yeah. I don't know specifically who they in general believed in or anything like that. Do you know?
I'm not sure. It refers to him as the priest of Midian, though, back earlier as well in the book. So, but he's going to be more confident after he catches up here with Moses, right?
Yeah, he will be. You want me to go and read? Take the
It
next
doesn't
part?
matter. Yeah, if you want to.
Okay. So let's start back in verse 8, and we'll read through 12. So it says, "And Moses told his father-in-law, all that the Lord had done to Pharaoh and to the Egyptians for Israel's sake, all the hardship that had come upon them in the way, and how the Lord had delivered them. And Jethro rejoiced for all the good that the Lord had done to Israel, in that he had delivered them out of the hands of the Egyptians. Jethro said, Blessed be the Lord, who has delivered you out of the hand of the Egyptians, out of the hand of Pharaoh, and has delivered the people from under the hand of the Egyptians. Now I know that the Lord is greater than all gods, because in this affair they dealt arrogantly with the people. And Jethro, Moses' father-in-law, brought a burnt offering and sacrifices to God. And Aaron came with all the elders of Israel to eat bread with Moses' father-in-law before God." Now you'll never unsee how many times it says Moses' father-in-law. All right, so we have here Moses tells Jethro everything that God has done. And what's Jethro's reaction to this? He rejoices. And what does he say here that's maybe interesting, just to what we have just been talking about? Yes. Now I know the Lord is God, right? He's greater than all the other gods. Which, does that exclude, or in his mind, maybe even exclude that there are other gods, it seems? Maybe, maybe not, right? It's kind of hard to tell. He says he's greater than all the other gods. It's like, are you saying that means that there aren't other gods, or are you just saying like he's better than the other gods? What does that mean? At the very least, he thinks that Jehovah is the greatest God, but it could be here that he thinks that Jehovah is the one and true God because of his, if you want to say, domination of the other Egyptian gods. So that's something there. We see at the end, after they've talked and they've had time to visit, we see the elders and Aaron. They come to Jethro, and how do they treat Jethro? Yes. So do they accept him? They do, right? So again, I don't know if I'm reading too much into it, but earlier it seems like maybe he's afraid of being accepted by the people. And here we see that they do accept him. And maybe partly because of the confession he just made about Jehovah being the greatest. I don't know what to make of it.
Think about when Moses left out what he was going to do. The Lord has asked me to go to Egypt and be the deliverer for my people. And apparently, there was some doubt, at least in Jethro's mind. But at this point, he, if there was any doubt, there's not any more. He's glad to hear that what Moses said the Lord was going to take him and help him do did happen.
I like the other point about where you made mention that it just goes on and on saying Jethro is the father-in-law of Moses. The only reason that I can apprehend why this is spoken so many times is Moses is writing this to the children of Israel. And who know, Jethro may have been a prominent name throughout the children. And by saying that this is my father-in-law, it separates him from any other Jethros that they know about. And I think that's the reason that's possibly, I mean, that's usually what's happened. Even today, if you've got somebody that's got several names, you identify with the person that they're talking about.
Good point. It could be. Not sure. I don't know Israelite names very well.
Well, let's look. Jethro's there with him. And we're to verse 13, and it says, "And so it was on the next day that Moses sat to judge the people, and the people stood before Moses from morning until evening. So when Moses' father-in-law saw that he all that he did for the people, he said, 'What is this thing that you are doing for the people? Why do you alone sit, and all the people stand before you from morning until evening?'" So we have a situation here. Well, Jethro's kind of spending a little time here before he leaves, and the next day after he gets there, Moses, he sees what Moses, I guess, days have turned into here, and it seems like Moses has a full-time job of judging the people. However many people there are here, 2-3 million. It seems like they're just lined up there to speak to Moses, and Moses is making decisions on whatever's going on and what needs to be done and how things need to be handled. And it seems like that is taking up his time, his whole day. And Jethro, he questions him as to why is everything, why is this going this way? So in verse 15, Moses said to his father-in-law, "Because the people come to me to inquire of God. When they have a difficulty, they come to me, and I judge between one and another, and I make known the statutes of God and his laws." So Moses explains, well, they have questions, they have situations, and I make decisions, and I relay to them the Lord's statutes and the Lord's laws and what he would want in their situation. So Moses says, well, that's why that's why we do that. That's why I'm doing that. Make this point now. They've turned, one of the promises was they've become a great nation, and they're on their way to that. You might say they're already there. There's a lot of them. They're not an organized nation in any way yet, though, right? Even a situation like this, they don't have any organization as far as how this stuff is handled. It's just Moses. Everybody looks to Moses when they need anything, and Moses looks to the Lord, and that's they're not set up. They don't have anything set up to handle situations like this. But in verse 17, Moses' father-in-law said to him, "The thing that you do is not good. But you and these people who are with you will surely wear yourselves out, for this thing is too much for you, and you're not able to perform it by yourself. Both you, 19, I'm off one. Listen out of my voice. I will give you counsel, and God will be with you. Stand before God, before the people, that you may bring the difficulties to God. And you shall teach them, and you will teach them the statutes and the laws, and show them the way in which they must walk, and the work they must do. Moreover, you shall select from all the people able men, such as fear God, men of truth, hating covetousness, and place such over them to be rulers of thousands, rulers of hundreds, and rulers of fifties, and rulers of tens. And let them judge the people at all times. Then it will be that every great matter that they shall bring to you, but every small matter they themselves shall judge. So it will be easier for you, for they will bear the burden with you. If you do this thing, and God so commands you, then you will be able to endure, and all the people will also go to their place in peace." So Jethro has a suggestion. He says, "This is not good that you're the only one that they're able to come to, and that's set up to be able to help solve situations and problems that arise." And they just haven't set any organization up before. But he suggests setting up different levels of capable men, and it gives some description of the type men: able men, fear God, men of truth, hating covetousness. Put them in place to be judges. Now Moses is the ultimate kind of leader at this time, and if something it can't be handled at the lower levels, it can work its way up to him, and he could just deal with some of those larger issues. So he suggests this, and Moses heeded the voice of his father-in-law and did all that he had said. And Moses chose able men out of Israel and made them heads over the people, rulers of thousands, rulers of hundreds, rulers of fifties, and rulers of tens. So they judged the people at all times, and the hard cases they brought to Moses, but they judged every small case themselves. And then Moses let his father-in-law depart and went his way to his own land. So they implement this plan, and it seems like it's a good plan. You have anything to add to?
Yeah, maybe a little bit.
Go for it.
So I want to back up just one second. When Jethro, this is quite a bit, but when Jethro says, why they got around you, Moses says, well, they're needing to know what God wants them to know, basically. I think that's good because that helps us understand and also helps us know that Moses understands his role with the people. His role with the people, and we'll see this continue, his role with the people is to help them understand what God wants. Okay? Now, he's here maybe in some ways, and you brought this up, Jethro brought this up, but he's maybe in some ways kind of micromanaging, and it's going to wear him out. The question I have is, and I'm not trying to be contrarian or anything like that, but do we think that Jethro's advice was good advice? I think it is.
The reason I think it is there's no verses after that God condemned what Jethro had told Moses to do. Where if it had been bad advice, God would, when Moses went to God, he would have said, hey, you don't need to be doing, this is not a good suggestion for you to rule the people.
Yeah, so I think that's one like a good argument for this is good advice. Is that you see God condemn this? No, and in fact, if we look later on in Numbers chapter 11, Moses kind of has maybe a concern of his own. He's like, I'm not able to bear the burden of all the people, and what God does is He sets up something very similar to this. He says, select 70 men, or I will select 70 men to be elders, and they'll help bear this burden for you or with you. So he obviously sets up something similar. So he's not opposed to the structure itself. So the only thing I want us to think about maybe here, and I'm not saying it was bad advice all in all, but it may be interesting for us to ask ourselves, why did Moses not go to God with this information? Because I think most of the time when we ask make the statement that so-and-so, whoever it is in the Bible, didn't go to God, most of the time we view that as what type of thing? A bad thing, negative thing, right? It's not good that he didn't go to God. Here it doesn't mention it. Maybe he did. It just doesn't mention it. But here it doesn't mention Moses goes to God. And I wonder if that's something that, is that bad or is it just indifferent? Maybe God doesn't care much about this. Maybe that's, Steve had brought up his silence after this. He doesn't condemn it. He also doesn't say it's a good thing, but he doesn't condemn it. And that would be maybe a better evidence it's not good. But maybe something to think about. Yeah.
Well, too, as I was reading it, you kind of wonder. Moses had been, when God wanted something done, he had told Moses.
Mm-hmm.
And Moses was the go-between, and you don't see communication with Jethro. So as I was reading it, you're wondering, sort of like, who does Jethro? Not in an ugly way, but you're like, who does Jethro think he is? Telling Moses what to do in this situation.
Right.
Because God had been with Moses. He had been giving Moses his instruction. Not saying it's bad advice.
Right.
It was sort of kind of what came to my mind.
Yeah. Yeah, and I don't know there's obviously, it's good advice as far as the merit of it, right? Would Moses have worn himself out, we think?
Yes.
Yeah, by human standards, yes, right? Maybe God was being with him and giving him the vigor he needed in order to do it. I don't know. But it does seem like good advice as far as to be efficient and to have everything set up. But I did want us to, like you said, I want us to think about, is this something that God would be okay with if he takes his advice from someone else? Yeah.
Saying that to me, but Jethro was telling him, you need to teach the people the statutes and laws so they'll know how to. Like, it's been like,
Yes.
Be like a scribe and teach what God wants you to do. You have to be-
I do think so, yeah. I think that's right.
23 is what I want.
Yes. So the way that's supposed to read, from what I understand, so I saw someone make the argument this is not good advice. And what they said was that the reading of this is supposed to be if you do this thing, and the if also goes with if God commands you. And so that if you do this thing, God commands you, as in God command, and if God commands you to do this thing, then you will be able to endure it, and people will also go to the place of peace.
Was Jethro telling him to go to God first?
Yeah, so
That's what it kind of looks like to me.
that's what they said, and then it doesn't mention that Moses does that. And so that's what they said. Maybe this is not.
I think we've kind of stopped because we've got it broke up in chapters and verses and all that. As a scroll, when you get into 19, he does go up to God.
Mhm.
And at that time, in the conversation between him and God, there's not any mention not to do this. Plus, later on, we'll see that his father-in-law, by teaching them the ordinance and the laws, what to do, God actually puts the law on something that it ain't from somebody's remembrance of what it is. They're actually on stone that they can see. And then you could also make a copy, even though the main copy was kept in the Ark of the Covenant. But it'd be like today. If we got any questions, we can go to the book and read what is the law and what Christ has commanded in his teachings. Where years ago, they took all the Bibles away from the people during the Dark Ages. I mean, if we didn't have the Bible to go by, how would we know what's right in God's eye and what's the history of where sin come from?
Mhm.
We would have no idea without the book.
So God, you're saying later on God strengthens their understanding by having it written down as opposed to word of mouth.
Right.
Yeah. Yep.
I'm fixing to have that pretty soon.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I just want to say that to say I don't know the answer if it's good or bad. I see merits of it, and I also see maybe it wasn't great in every aspect. So I'm not trying to say it's one thing or the other. I hope you understand. I'm just, maybe we should consider it too. Like maybe it's not perfect in the way it was handled, but obviously God was okay with it. I think Steve made that point. I think that's a good point. God doesn't strike anyone dead over or even condemn it. So I think that's good.
And I have a note, I think it's from the sermon, on verse 21, that this is the first recorded description of what leaders should look like. To be able men, to fear God, men of truth, hating bribes.
Mhm.
I'm not
Yeah.
sure where I got that, but I had this note.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Might have been listening to the same sermon. Right? All right. Well, let's get into chapter 19. If we could get to verse 15, that would be a good stopping point. So we'll see if we can do that. If we don't, it's okay. But
Verse 15.
yeah, well, we may. It might take me all 5 minutes to do that. I don't know. But it's the third month. There's the time reference that I mentioned earlier. And it begins chapter 19. It's the third month, in the third month at least, after the children of Israel had gone out of the land of Egypt, on the same day that they came to the wilderness of Sinai. For they had departed from Rephidim and come to the wilderness of Sinai and camped in the wilderness. So Israel camped there before the mountain. So we have a location. They're near Sinai now. And it says in verse 3, and Moses went up to God, and the Lord called to him from the mountain, saying, thus you shall say to the house of Jacob, and tell the children of Israel, you have seen what I did to the Egyptians, and how I bore you on eagle's wings, and brought you to myself. Now therefore, if you will indeed obey my voice and keep my covenant, then you shall be a special treasure to me above all people. For all the earth is mine, and you shall be to me a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. These are the words which you shall speak to the children of Israel. All right, so the Lord comes to Moses. He says, I want you to go to the children of Israel. I want you to tell them. And I have a story about this in my notes. This is when I was little, I learned this. I will be your God if you will be my people. That covenant criteria there that the Lord is offering to be their God if they will heed His voice and keep His commandments. They will be a special people to Him. So this is a very important point in this this story and in the Bible history, that the Lord comes to them and offers this, and we see this repeated many times. But he comes to Moses and he says, I want you to go to the children of Israel and I want you to tell them this. So Moses came and called for the elders of the people and laid before them all these words which the Lord had commanded them. And all the people answered together and said, all that the Lord has spoken we will do. So Moses brought back the words of the people to the Lord. So the Lord comes and I will be your God if you're willing to obey me and be my people. And what do they say? Yes, we want that deal. We will take that. We want that. Yes. All that the Lord has said, we will do. This interaction here is one that we will look back on in the future as we're studying. You have anything, comment, or anything at this point?
Yeah, maybe a couple things. So first of all, the deal, like you said, obey me and you will be special, basically. And you said, does that sound like a good deal? They think it sounds like a good deal too. Do they always view it that way? No. They end up at different times viewing it as a burden. I just want to point out the language that's used here about you shall be to me a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. Is that repeated anywhere? Yes, I see nods. Yes. Yes, and it's repeated about who? Christians. Do we always view it the way we should? No. Sometimes we view the same deal as a burden. How does that work out for the Israelites?
Not good.
Not well. All right, we should probably take note of that. That this is the deal, and at first they seem excited about it. We probably did too. But we can't let it be a burden to us, or can't view it as a burden.
So the Lord said to Moses, behold, I come to you in the thick cloud, that the people may hear when I speak to you and believe you forever. So Moses told the words of the people to the Lord. So the Lord says, I'm going to let the people hear me speak to you through the cloud. Now, they're familiar with the cloud, right? The cloud has been leading them throughout their wandering in the wilderness here that they've done so far. I'm going to let them hear me speak to you so that they will believe you forever. I'm going to let them see or hear this interaction that I'm going to have with you. So in verse 10, the Lord said to Moses, go to the people and consecrate them today and tomorrow and let them wash their clothes. So the children of Israel are fixing to get to see the Lord interact with Moses. And they start there to prepare. It says, go to the people, get them ready. Tell them to wash their clothes. Verse 11, let them be ready for the third day. For on the third day, the Lord will come down upon Mount Sinai in the sight of all the people. You shall set bounds for the people all around, saying, take heed to yourselves that you do not go up to the mountain or touch its base. Whoever touches the mountain shall surely be put to death. Not a hand shall touch him, but he shall surely be stoned or shot with an arrow. This is pretty serious. Whether man or beast, he shall not live. When the trumpet sounds long, they shall come near the mountain. So Moses went down from the mountain to the people and sanctified the people, and they washed their clothes. And he said to the people, be ready for the third day. Do not come near your wife. So God is going to let the people of Israel there experience him in some way on this mountain. But they have to get ready. It's going to be 3 days. It says you have 3 days to get ready. Consecrate yourselves. Wash your clothes. Don't even think about coming close to the mountain. Rope it off. If anybody goes and touches it, you're not even to touch them. You're to kill them, but you're not even to touch them while you're doing it. You're to stone them or you're to shoot them with an arrow. If an animal, it is even mentioned. There's a lot of special details here as to when the Lord's presence is here on this mountain, how much importance is to be placed on what they're dealing with. So they're getting ready for that. What do you have here in our last minute or so to go with that before we end?
I don't think I have much.
Anything?
It just sets the scene for a pretty amazing event was about to happen.
A lesson I think Lonnie and Chris on ago that the people didn't know how to cleanse their heart. They didn't know how to get ready. So this was the way of them making themselves ready, realizing that when you come to the Lord, you're giving everything. You can't, they didn't know how. So he's trying to teach them how to come to the Lord.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, so this is kind of the first time they're experiencing that, so they need to be taught. I like that.
Well, he's using just the physical stuff, even though later on they're going to learn the spiritual side of it. But they know if they're dirty and they clean themselves and they got dirty clothes and they clean it, they know that they're clean in that part. And then for them to be sanctified and not to go to the mountain means the same way when Moses sings out of the bush, the ground you're standing on is holy. So when the Lord comes down on the mountain, all that land up to where he's given them a borderline to put is actually holy property.
Yeah. That's foreshadowing of tabernacle and things like that afterwards too. That's a good point.
All right. Appreciate your comments. Yeah, we're back on track with the schedule now, so that's good. We did get there, didn't we?
Thanks for watching. If you found this video to be beneficial, please follow us on Facebook or subscribe to our YouTube channel. Feel free to share it with others that you feel like may benefit from it. If you need to contact us, please contact us via email at quinn.church@yahoo.com. Also, if you're in the area, we would love for you to come visit with us at one of our assemblies. Have a good day.